Yeah. Could someone message Shamar and tell him he would just have to rejoin, please? Yeah. And so yeah, see, Scarlett is like a pretty awesome person that I met. I think I met you late 2018, was it?
Yeah.
And around that time, she, alongside my cousin, they just finished a boot camp in New York. 1 second, people are coming in. Yes. And I was still at Howard University, finishing my last semester at Howard. And my cousin told me, hey, I'm trying to get into tech. Could you come across and like see what we can figure out? So I pretty much I came to New York. I spent like a week. It was one of my awesome weeks in New York because I got to explore it, Scarlett, my cousin, and all of their boot campers. Where we even went to Chinatown. We found some speakeasies. It was pretty dope. That was like the first time I truly enjoyed New York. And Scarlett, Kyle, and all of the other boot campers, they completed a 3 months program at Flatiron, correct? It was a
Correct.
3 month program, yeah. And that was like their first exposure to programming. They may have done a bit of self prep before to get into the boot camp. I'm not sure how intense that prep was. Maybe Scarlett can speak more on that. But pretty much, when they got into the boot camp, they were taught everything in relation to being able to solve problems with technology, as well as to build full stack apps in Ruby and JavaScript and React and like all of these different things. At the end of that 3 month boot camp, they were given, well, not necessarily given, but the goal is to like land a job as quickly as possible because one, they didn't pay for the boot camp or unless they were lucky and fortunate. And two, the agreement between the boot camp and themselves was to learn how to program. The boot camp will help you get a job. And once you receive your job, you will start the income share agreement such that um, if the bootcamp gets you this tech job, then you all can share in the earnings that you eventually get. So they try their best to get you different jobs through tech prep. They have a bunch of like career resources and companies that come to Flatiron to specifically hire the boot campers. But post the 3 month curriculum, it's on the boot camper to actually go and study what it means to get a technical interview, like how to prepare for a technical interview and how to actually land it, and how to be strategic in terms of what role you want to end up in and what type of company, what size. Is it a startup? Is it like a small team in terms of 1 to 10? Is it a big company like Microsoft with over 100,000 people? Is it a Google? What exactly is your philosophy? Are you someone who don't care in terms of like ethics and impact, and therefore you work for a company like Facebook who really don't care, or really like work for a company that is truly mission driven and like all these different things? So like in regards to that whole interview process and that trying to decide your job process, you have to do a lot of introspection in terms of what you want, as well as like what in the bootcamp curriculum you enjoy doing. For instance, I don't like front end at all, and it took me a year to accept that. And since I've accepted that, whenever I go into a project, I ensure I get a front end engineer to fill my gaps. So like all these different introspections help you to define your like exit strategy into like the workforce, and then from there you're able to do your interview prep, which you have to run yourself. And like it's very intensive, and Scarlett will tell you because she just redid it again. And through that, you also have to simultaneously be applying to a bunch of jobs. And usually, how the tech space works is that multiple people around the world, like India, you saw the size of Indians who in the tech field. There's Chinese, they are like Africans, they are Caribbean people, they are like actual Americans, all actively applying for these jobs at these companies. And these companies have like one portal and like a fixed amount of recruiters who go through these job applications, review these resumes before deciding, okay, this person resume stands out to me enough for me to reach out to them to get to the next step. So therefore, yes, you're applying, but that's not the ultimate way to get into tech. You have to know people and build relationships, in the sense that the most times you land a job is through one, applying, but then also finding someone you know working at that company who can go submit a referral to you. And through that, it sort of helps you jump the pipeline and so forth. So enough about me, right? Once again, Scarlett is pretty awesome, and she's gonna take the floor where she will walk through her story, whatever she likes to share, and then afterwards, we can get into questions and so forth. How does that sound?
And thank you, Whitney, for having me. Excited to chat with you all. So a little about me. I went to college and majored in art history, so very far removed from the STEM world. my 4 years of college. I got exposed to computer science my last year, last semester. It was kind of like a bucket list course. I wanted to see if it was interesting. I'd heard great things about this one professor who taught the intro class, so I took it, loved it, and immediately it felt like I had made a mistake my past 3 years of majoring in art history. But I was like, it's okay, at least I will have the memories of having enjoyed this one computer science class. And then at the time, I didn't know about boot camps. So I really figured like that was it for me, that my interest would end there. Following college, I was a high school teacher for 3 years. I did it 1 year in Beijing, working with students to apply to US colleges, and then 2 years in New York, doing the same similar work, this time focusing with STEM students and helping them apply to US colleges. And I think it was in that year and working with STEM students and asking them like, well, what do you think you'll major in? And hearing so many say computer science. And I was like, yeah, I wish I had majored in computer science as well. And it got me to think like, okay, it's been 3 years since I graduated. Are there now programs that might be geared to people like me who have like the second career interest? And luckily, I learned more about boot camps. I took like a year to make sure I was ready for this career transition. One, because boot camps are typically really expensive. A lot of them ask you to pay up front. And then two, it wasn't like I had a transferable background. Like I was a high school teacher, I majored in art history. So I took a year to do research into boot camps and also to do some free tutorials on like Codecademy, Free Code Camp, I think is another one, to make sure that I was willing to make that investment and that I would see myself go through the program. So graduated in 2015, and then it was in 2018 that I did the boot camp. Like Whitney said, it was like a 3.5 month program. It was very hands-on and practical. Like it didn't teach you the things you would learn with a CS degree, meaning like data structures, theories. We went straight to building applications. So in those 3 months, I built, I believe, 4 projects. So I had a portfolio of 4 web apps that I could show in my interviews. My curriculum at Flatiron focused a lot on pair programming. It was full stack, so it was broken into modules. Every 3 weeks, we'd switch topics. So we started with Ruby, then Ruby on Rails, JavaScript, and then React and Redux. They chose these languages because it's really popular, and they wanted to give us the curriculum that would most prepare us for what the real world is asking for from developers. I got my first job out of the boot camp, I think within 3 months, as a solutions engineer. I'm also willing to talk about the mistakes I've made. Feel free to ask me those later because there are some mistakes I made. But I was a solutions engineer within 3 months of graduating Flatiron, and that role was kind of like technical support. So I would chat with our customers about product issues they were having. So it was technical, but I wasn't coding, because what I would do is if there were any product bugs that were brought up by our customers, I'd then delegate those tickets or issues to our software engineering team. One of the mistakes I'll like touch on quickly now is I think when I graduated the boot camp, I didn't know what roles existed in tech. And I assumed that just because my role title had solutions engineer, that I would be coding. And that was a big mistake. It was not a coding role. And so I started to job search again, I think within my 3rd or 4th month at the company I was at. And currently I'm at Lyft. I did a 10-month software engineering apprenticeship, which was geared for bootcamp grads. More and more companies now are having bootcamps specifically apprenticeships for bootcamp grads, because maybe you've seen that a lot of internships, the traditional internships at top companies, are for CS grads or current CS students. So Lyft had one specifically for bootcamp grads. I was fortunate to have come across the job role on Twitter. That's another thing I recommend, to get on Twitter. I've come across so many resources and opportunities in the tech Twitter community. And so, yeah, that was luckily like my way to get back into software engineering after having had that like non-coding role for a few months. And so it's a 10-month program. I got a return offer, so I'm actually starting on Monday as a full-time software engineer, which I'm excited about, nervous and excited about. But I'm a big believer in the bootcamp model. It's, I think, becoming more and more accepted by companies, and there are more and more programs or entry-level roles that are being like curated for a bootcamp background. So definitely glad to see the popularity increase, because I'm someone that was really worried that boot camps were a scam. I was like, how is it possible in 3 to 4 months I'd get a dev job? But it's definitely possible. And I'm happy to touch on any more aspects of what I just spoke on in detail.
Wow, that's an awesome introduction. And thanks for sharing all those details. So my immediate question would be, how long did it take you to find that sweet apprenticeship at Lyft? And how long did it take you to prep for it and then interview for it and then find out you got it?
Yeah, so I'd say my experience with getting the Lyft apprenticeship is definitely unusual. So I think, I was on Twitter one night in like April 2019. I applied within 2 weeks because the application had like a closing window. And then my interview, I think, was 2 weeks after. So I really didn't have, the traditional like, oh, I have like some time to prepare. I didn't know what the process was. It was a new program. I didn't have people to like ask like, oh, how did you prep? So I prepped like religiously for a week before the interview because that's how much time I had. It also wasn't the traditional interviewing structure. So usually you have like an intro call with the recruiter just to make sure you're a good fit. And then you have your first technical round, which might be like an online coding pairing session. And then the next step might be the on-site. So Lyft kind of got rid of those first two. After I submitted my application, I went straight to the on-site. And the on-site was a series of 4 pair programming interviews with Lyft engineers. And pair programming is like working on a problem with another engineer. So I had like 4 different mini rounds with each engineer so they could see how I code, my personality type. I guess in all, the process happened mid-April to me getting an offer end of May. It was very quick. So I know it's like very unusual. And as Whitney mentioned, it's really important to get referrals. And I remember when I tried to apply, when I applied, I didn't have anyone at Lyft. I didn't know anyone. So I really didn't think I'd get even a call back for like a next round. But I think what made my experience so different is that the person running the apprenticeship rejected referrals. Like so many people he knew were like, hey, like I heard you're doing this. Can, my friend just graduated from boot camp. Can you get them in? And he just rejected that straight out because he had his own philosophy on like how referrals are actually hurting boot campers because they might not know people in tech. So I got lucky in that case because I think in another company, my application would not have been brought up if I didn't have a referral. So that's why I say my whole Lyft interviewing process was so unusual for the better because it helped me.
Cool. Anyone else, feel free to jump off the mic and off mute and ask your question. Marlon, do you have any questions for Scarlett?
Give me 1 moment. I'll get back to you.
Well, Samira, do you want to try next?
I'm working on something here. Yes.
Cool. Samira, do you have a question?
I'm open to answering anything you might want to have answers to.
I have a back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
For somebody that I know you said you majored in history art, right?
Yeah, art history.
Oh my gosh. Sorry, something's going on my headphones. So I was just some advice if you can give me pertaining to right now I'm in the boot camp, and I graduated from SGU, our university in Grenada, with a bachelor's degree in IT. And most of the, um, I would say, jobs and stuff I've been seeing is mainly to do with computer science. But since the boot camp, after that, I would also want to do certain things online that would get certified in different languages. So it's kind of like a range of different things I want to do. But what's your advice to kind of break it down into one or mainly focus after the boot camp? What advice would you give me to that?
So just to make sure I understand, like, advice that I might have on what you can do after the boot camp to like get to continue preparing for like your first dev role.
Yeah.
Okay. Good question, because that's one of the areas I made a mistake in. I'm not sure what your boot camp's curriculum was, but Flatirons didn't prepare you for a traditional technical interview. And by that I mean it didn't cover like how to do well with answering algorithms. And I think, if you've had other careers besides, your new career switch, so before I was a teacher, and those interviews are all cultural. So I kind of, when I graduated from my boot camp, I went straight into applying to jobs. I was like, it's okay, like I'll just do well in the cultural interviews and hopefully be able to do well in the technical ones. So I didn't give myself enough time to do more technical interview prep. And so I actually even failed some of the cultural rounds because I wasn't prepared to talk about like how what I would bring to a tech role. So even though it was a cultural interview, it was still very technical, and I hadn't taken the time to like really figure out like what I wanted to do in tech, what kind of roles I was more interested in. Like what you mentioned, saying like she knows she's not that interested in front end. Like I didn't. Once I graduated, I still didn't even know how to like articulate my boot camp experience. So I would say like something I wish I'd done is spending more time doing algorithms, spacing it out so that you're not cramming it. And then if you have time, there are other nice to haves. And by nice to haves, I mean they'll look great on your resume, but in the end, you're going to be assessed on your technical interview. So nice to have, if you have the time, would be like maybe making a portfolio, maybe doing another project with maybe your peers that you worked with in your bootcamp or by yourself, perhaps picking up another language. But I would say like emphasize preparing for technical interviews.
Okay.
And I'm happy to share with Whitney like a good course I did on Udemy or Udemy. I always forget how that's pronounced.
Yes.
With Whitney.
Yeah, I saw certain things on EDX.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So, question, Scarlett. Where did you make your portfolio, and where did you keep it? Like, did you mention actively right now as well? And yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've actually never made a portfolio. It's one of those like things that's out on my list forever. I've attempted to, like, I tried to make one using Gatsby because I follow so many people on Twitter. Like, yeah, I made my blog using Gatsby. So I don't have a portfolio where I keep all of my projects. What I did instead is like on GitHub, you can like pin certain repos. So what I've made sure to do is make sure for like each repo that I have. So for each of my projects, I've like detailed like what my tech stack is. I even did video demos walking a user through using my app. I included information on how to run the app if they're going to download the repo locally. So the time I didn't spend into making a portfolio, I just tried to make sure each of my like project repos were clear, and I also blog. So definitely it's not all centralized. That's still something on my bucket list to make a portfolio. But a nice thing you can do on LinkedIn is like just link all of those things. So perhaps linking your blog and your GitHub so that your projects are easy to find and your blog is easy to find. Yeah, I have not made a portfolio. I need to do that.
I will actually challenge that. I don't, for instance, I had a portfolio, and each time I keep tearing it down, I'm like, no, I'm going to leverage the platforms that exist like GitHub, LinkedIn, Medium.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
And like you said, you can just link it to your LinkedIn. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I will say, from what advice I've gotten from other devs, if you're someone that really wants to focus on front end, making a portfolio can really help you in the job process because you're showing like your aesthetics, how you think about user experience. They say if you're more of a back-end engineer, you don't really need a portfolio. This is advice you can take, not take. But they say like having a portfolio for front-end roles could be really helpful. And yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else has a question? Richard? Maybe you?
Yeah, I have one. I hope it isn't too soon to ask this. But what were some of the mistakes that you made?
Oh yeah, one of the mistakes I made. I feel like being in a boot camp and depending on the structure, so mine was fully immersive, it was full time. It was full time, so I couldn't work. So I really had all this time now dedicated to like learning about tech. And I came from a career that wasn't even directly related to tech. So one of the things I wished I did during the boot camp was read more articles, be more curious. I think I was just focused on the bootcamp curriculum, didn't take the time to learn more about what DevOps is, what is infrastructure, what is deploying. So I think I kind of like limited, or I didn't maximize how much free time I had, and I didn't maximize that time to like get more techie. You know, it's like the perfect time. You're doing this one boot camp, it's full time. Why not like try to like push yourself more to be more immersed in it? So that's one mistake. I wish I'd read more articles. Another thing is not researching the different roles you can have in tech. So I mentioned how I got that solutions engineer role thinking it'd be coding. Then my first day I find out it's not coding. So that's a lot of time that I could have been like, hey, what's a solutions engineer? You know, I could have asked questions in the interview, for example, like what percentage of my role is coding? Because I would have found out that it's 10%, but I didn't ask those questions. That being said, I do think any first exposure you can have in tech is still valuable. Even though I didn't code much at my solutions role, I think having that foot in the door definitely helped. For example, I could have stayed longer and tried to be promoted internally to a software engineering role. Like there are ways I think I could have made it work. So I think one, do your research to see what roles there are in tech, making sure you understand what the responsibilities will be, making sure you're okay with what the role will look like. And two, just being open though still, because any opportunity is still a great opportunity when you're, especially, you know, coming from a non-traditional background, having your foot in the door is already a huge step.
That's awesome. What made you realize that you needed to be more curious?
When I graduated, there's all these like, you know, hindsights later. For example, and it's like embarrassing, but I did like a mock interview offered through Flatiron. They give you like one free mock interview with this external company, and they asked me, oh, you built your project in React. Why did you build it in React? And I was like, oh, because that was the language my bootcamp taught. You know, like instead of going into detail about like what makes React better than Vue or Angular, like those were questions I didn't ask myself in bootcamp. I just took the knowledge and was like, okay, this is the only right way to do it. And I think once I started being asked those questions in interviews, I was like, wait, I don't think I really understand why this framework was chosen or why this language is more efficient than the other. So definitely use your bootcamp time, especially when you have access to instructors. Like that is the time to be asking all of your, you know, your newbie questions in like a vulnerable and safe environment, because it can be scarier to ask those questions in the real world.
That's a perfect jam. Like literally always look for alternatives of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't take anything for face value. You should always be, I guess, a challenger, like a devil's advocate, to be like, okay, you're telling me use React, but why React? Mm-hmm. What else is there other than React? What is React built on? Like, why that? So that's awesome. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. And I know you say it's embarrassing, but I think your journey has been one of the really most impressive ones from your cohort. So you're doing great. Let's see. Priest asks, what was the most impressive topic for you in the bootcamp, especially one that you go back to even now as you're like working full time?
I think okay, there are two, and I know it's to be the most impressive, but there are two that I still find value even in my full-time role to this day. is pair programming. So, and it happens to be like non-technical, like directly, or yeah, it's technical, but like the two most impressive things to me aren't like directly technical things, because you can pair program on anything. It doesn't have to be coding. But one was pair programming because it's kind of like, it kind of puts you in this scary space because you're working aside someone who might know more than you, and you're making mistakes beside someone. And Flatiron had us pair program almost every day, and all of our portfolio projects were group projects. You worked with one other person, so you were constantly collaborating. And I always considered myself collaborative, but then I realized how uncomfortable I am working with someone in a situation that I'm not familiar in. And but also, like, then I started to see the pros, like, well, I get to learn from them and they get to learn how to teach. The two sides are benefiting. And then another thing that I still find value in is like project management. So for my final project at Flatiron, it was portfolio based, and it was kind of like your showcase piece. So it was independent. And our instructor encouraged us to plan it out for a week. And to me, that seemed like too long of a time to plan. I wanted to get coding right away. But he showed us how to use Trello as like a project management system to talk about like, okay, what are your MVPs? Like, what's the bare minimum that you want your feature to do that you'd be happy like showing it to someone else, that you'd be happy yourself, like satisfied. And then from there, thinking about, okay, like what are the stretch goals? If you finish your MVPs, what are the next features you think would be great to add onto the project? And then I also used that time to test out any packages I wanted to use in my feature to make sure I knew how to use it, that I'd done the research. I looked into any APIs I thought I might want to play with. So I think I planned for a week and a half. And to me, that was a lot, because I think when you're starting coding, you just want to code. And I think even to this day at Lyft, like whenever I'm tech speccing, I now see the value of planning, even though still in the bottom of, I just want to like, I get antsy, I want to code. I always want to code. But I know that software engineering is more than just coding. And I think Flatiron did a good job of giving us a preview.
That's awesome. Do you actively grow your project management skills right now? For instance, I just got this really awesome Scrum Essentials book. Let me actually bring it. But like, what do you do right now to actively grow that? Or are you just staying involved in conversations that teaches you how the PM side of things plan stuff?
That's a good question. So currently in the team I'm on, I feel like I have less of project management. What's the word? Role model? I don't know if that's the right word, but I'll use role models just because the infra org gets space. Infra teams don't have a PM, only the product teams. So I feel like I don't really have an example as much as I did my first 6 months at Lyft, because my apprenticeship was rotational. So the first 6 months I did get to see like what a tech spec really looks like, a tech spec that's been approved by the PMs. I saw how detailed they can be with like mocks of the UIs. So I got that hint my first 6 months, but then on the infra side, it's less, from what I've seen, it was less detailed. And I think there's always a balance. I asked a lot of questions like, what's a good tech spec? Is it something that's really long, or what's the balance? And it depends on, I guess, the project and how complex it'll be. But I have a bunch of books I want to read. I think one I have on my list is, I think, Atomic Habits. Give me 1 second to look this.
Yeah. I can see the book in the chat as well. It's Essential Scrum, a practical guide to the most popular agile process. My PM on my team actually recommended it. So
nice. Yeah. I just want to get better for sure. There's so many things to grow in. Yeah, I'll put my link in here too.
Awesome. Great, thank you. And this is so important because although we are devs and we don't need to like come up above like our current sprint and our task at hand, just understanding how PM and like project management and how Scrum works helps you even plan how you do your task. For instance, like you take up a user story, most times it might be a really confusing user story, and the first thing you do is feel completely overwhelmed. Versus like taking a step back and understanding, one, you have enough time to plan the upskill or the research into that specific like complication that you may be feeling overwhelmed for. And you have that time, you have the freedom, you have the space, And if you don't feel like you have that time, you can tap one of your senior engineers, you can tap your manager, your tech lead, whoever on the team who is responsible for ensuring you have that time. So oftentimes I tell you all, scope your confusion to the task at hand, because when you get task oriented, it's very easy. Like preset coding is literally like writing. So you can't write an entire paragraph before actually knowing what word you want to start with. So that's how you can view the task management and like the importance of applying project management to your activities in terms of development. And for me, on my team at Microsoft, like my tech lead, the conversations he leads across like the project risk and like the project planning, sometimes it goes completely over my head. And all I do is just zone out. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm trusting you to do this. And then you're going to come back to me with this really scope project. And then from there, I'm able to run with it and create my own task-oriented plans to get to the definition of done that was defined. So it takes time, and eventually you see yourself getting higher, getting more exposure to that project planning, because that's how you grow your career in tech as well.
Yeah.
Question.
I just want to share a quick quote that showed me about planning. So I'm just going to put in the chat too. Because I was like, oh yeah, I resonate with that. So like nothing is hard if you divide it into small jobs. So
I
always
wanted to know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to know, like, in your experience of project management, like, what works for you, in terms of keeping the energy of the team, keeping people engaged. Yeah, like just like in terms of like managing the project, and I guess to some extent managing your team members.
That's a great question. I think for me, in terms of keeping the motivation up, I'm someone that loves deadlines, and not like for it to be like so constricting that you feel like you can't work, but I just like to know that there are milestones. I think that's huge to think about, like, okay, what do you want to have done at this step? You can add maybe specifics, like have this feature done, or you can even go further by saying have this feature done by this date. And I'm someone that likes to have those dates because that gives me something to look forward to, something to assess myself. I also like having conversations surrounding like a tech spec, so like the technical spec for what the feature should be, and I'll share it with others. I might share it with my manager, I might share it with my mentor, I might do all of the above. And that helps to flesh out questions that they have, so that later on, once like the group, or if it's a project I'm only doing, it helps to flesh out like future problems or future questions that might have to like result in a rework of the feature, which is like the worst case scenario when you're like weeks or months in and then they're like, wait, this whole thing needs to change. So I think having that initial conversation with your team about what the plan is, even though it's scary because at some point you do get really invested in what the project is and it becomes your baby. You don't want anyone to change it, but like having those conversations will save everyone time. And then I'm someone that likes goals, so like having milestones, and hopefully that style works for the whole team. And if not, like having a conversation with like what motivates you, how do you like to keep track? Like I know people who don't like Jira, don't like the Jira process, but like some managers are all about Jira, which is like another project management system. So yeah, I think having that conversation about what works with your team, and if it's just you, even, that's kind of like a rare opportunity to like really what's the word? Like mold the process to what's going to keep you motivated long term.
Yeah. And just to clarify, our project management tool we have been using is Azure DevOps. So pretty much your product backlog, you'll go into your sprint planning and the sprint view. That's what Scarlett is speaking of. A quick introduction, Travis, he is one of my OG mentees from Howard. He has had 2 internships in the past at Google. He has had a data bootcamp in Israel for 4 to 6 weeks. And he just recently came back from Ghana in a tech exchange program. No, actually, I mixed that up. He went to Ghana to immerse in the tech ecosystem over there, but he has been at Google for the past 3-4 months at a tech exchange program out in Silicon Valley. So I just invited him to this call as well. And some things that Scarlett said. So Scarlett answered from a perspective of like a developer on a team with a tech lead or PM and so forth, and is assigned a feature, and like how does she work best? So most times team culture is different. For instance, my tech lead on my team right now is completely, he's someone who just does the high level, and then you either have to go figure it out, but there isn't any solid processes in place, right? Where other people can be more process oriented and like micromanagers to the point of setting deadlines and all these different things. So as you journey as a developer, introspection is very important, because when you don't introspect, you'll find yourself like not producing or not being as productive, or your engineering velocity is declining, but you don't know why, right? And everyone has a different style of work and a different style of like how they, what optimizes their productivity. So the moment you find that, what you have to do is start pushing back on your team. For instance, I literally just pushed back this week on my team in regards to, hey, this is what I like, and you have to give me it like this, because if you don't, my productivity will increase. You wouldn't get what you need, because for me to succeed will be the success of the entire team. So if you don't speak up in regards to what works best for you, your team will never know, and it will come to a situation of you potentially being fired, or your entire team not making it to a specific deadline. And on the flip side of it, when I tech lead, what I try to do is, one, I need a personal touch in terms of a personal understanding of every person on my team. What are they interested in? What motivates them? Like, how do they work, right? And then on a weekly basis, we host retrospectives where we talk about what went well, what could have been improved, and what are the immediate action items we need to do. So what I do is I don't micromanage. I don't try to assign tasks to people. What I do is give you the week view of what needs to be done. And then accordingly, people will volunteer in regards to what user story or what tasks you take up based on your own interest in that technology or work stream. And then from there, it's a question of each week, I pretty much reassess you in regards to, are you a good fit for doing this in the future? And I have that conversation with you. You tell me your goals, what do you want to do, what you enjoy doing, and then we repeat until, because it's definitely the senior engineers and the tech leads' responsibility to ensure you're growing in your field. Like, that's not on you. What's on you is staying focused, breaking down and dividing your tasks into small jobs, and ensuring you stay curious and always do your best job. So, yeah.
I'm taking notes as well. I always learn from Whitney. I'm like writing that down.
I was saying you do recording after too. So Marlon had a question. Marlon, do you want to come off mute to ask your question? I believe it was along the lines of, how did you get courses, and like how did you, one, for instance, you're working on a project, and hey Marlon.
Yes. I want to know how did you were able to get resources or different modules that you can use within your project, and were you able to build your own modules?
Can you define what a module is for those who don't know, including myself?
Can you repeat that?
Could you tell us what you mean by a module? Give us an
When I say
example.
modules, like different codes that was already structured by the person that you can use within your project.
So pretty much packages. For instance, if you're working
Yes.
in a React world or Node world, and Node packages, and then actual code examples online that you can use, copy and paste, and reuse accordingly, correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess I can speak to more recently. By recently, it was still like 2 years ago. So for my final Flatiron project, I built a web application for viewing all the New York City art exhibitions, and I'll link it. I'll link it in a sec. But yeah, so it's a way where you can filter the kind of media you're interested in. So for example, if you want to see an exhibition on painting or film, and I also had a calendar, let's call it a modular packet, so that you can see where in New York this art exhibit was. I also had a calendar module / package where you can like plan out your visit. So if you want to see only exhibits happening from March 1st to March 25th, like it'll only show you those exhibits. And this is like, I was very new at building my own application. So I honestly just like Googled, like I knew I was working in React. And I knew what specific component I wanted. So I was like, okay, what are the React calendar components or packages? And from there, I would read the documentation closely to see if this was exactly what I was looking for. I'd even quickly install it, play with it, see if I liked it. For Google, like I knew Google had like developer tools. So they have their like Google Maps that you can like import into your package. And I also like signed up for like a free like developer key, an AP, so you can use their API to like render this Google Maps. In terms of, so I also mentioned how like my web application takes New York City art exhibits and shows that data on the page. So that one was trickier to find. But I think it was really just me Googling like, okay, any like New York art exhibit APIs. And, you know, of course you'd come across like maybe the Met, but I wanted all of New York City. And I finally came across a website called, I think like, I don't know, something like Fun APIs or something. And it's like a huge index of different APIs you can play with in your personal projects. Like if you want a website to be about cat pictures, there's a cat API. If you want, you know, you get the gist. So I luckily came across one that had New York art exhibits, and that was really lucky. But it was a lot of searching, a lot of like playing around to make sure that's exactly what I wanted. Because I think for me in the beginning, a lot of it is vocabulary. Like if you don't know how to search something, you won't get your match just because you didn't like have the right keywords. So in that case, especially with mentors, instructors that you're working with, of course, use them as a resource to help them gear you to the right like websites, right vocabulary, because then from there you can find what you're looking for. I've never built my own package, so I don't have experience with that. But I did borrow a lot from what people have already made. I think you'll hear a lot like in tech, you shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel. Like if someone already like spent a lot of time to build something that has your use case, like implement it. But of course, like always be willing to like make improvements. And with that, just like a quick plug for open source, like if it's a package that you find a bug in, opening a pull request to make a fix, you know, giving back to the community. Hopefully that answers your question.
That was perfect. And one thing I will add is the fact that I find myself going to GitHub more in the sense that GitHub is your portfolio, but also like, for instance, let's say I want to implement a Stripe API. I know exactly what is, for instance, the moment I click import Stripe into my project. For instance, if I'm working in the Express app and I do the import or use app.use Express, I take that line of code and then I go to GitHub and I search app.use Express, right? And in GitHub, I filter across like the different projects so you can even see the languages, and I can probably walk through it really quickly if you like. Let's see. And in the meanwhile, okay, we got one more question came up, but I will show you this really quickly. Are you seeing GitHub?
No.
No? Are you seeing oranges?
No, I don't see your screen yet.
Well, okay, cool.
Oh, maybe it's just me.
Wi-Fi in New York.
Me.
Been having problems. Let's see. I'm gonna reshare again. So, like Scarlett said, you shouldn't really reinvent the wheel because more than likely, what you as beginning entry-level developers, what our best task is to know what we're trying to do and then go find some examples online and then customize it for our use case, right? So whoever is familiar with Express, I think it's app.use, right? Anyone could give me that guidance? Let's say it's app.use, right? Once I search in app.use, you'll see a bunch of repositories come up, and I can filter it based on the language further. So let's say I want to go into JavaScript because I mentioned it's a Node project. And then you'll actually come down to the point of app.use was a very terrible example. Let me get a better one. Will someone please feel free to share? I'm putting up one of my code examples. Let's see. All right. So you can ignore what I pasted here. And pretty much this is a project I'm working on right now. I just grabbed that code. And then as you can see on GitHub, it shows that across multiple repositories, this specific line occurred 2,000 plus times. So I will click into code, and then I can scroll through to see like, okay, how did they use this, right? And I can filter this even further. So this language is actually HCL. So I will look into HCL to see if this will give me a better filter. And then I can sort this according to like recently indexed, best match. But let's say this is what I was looking for. Like, how do I use this? So I'll click into this, and then I'll be able to get a specific example using that code snippet that I can, and then I may actually go through all the others, or maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 versions before I can get my example. Was that helpful? Cool. And that's it. All right, pre-saddle.
I've also done that, and I've also used SourceGraph. I don't know if like all companies have access to it, or because it's paid, but you can essentially do what you're doing on GitHub. So I use both that, and Lyft has their own SourceGraph where you can like search up code within your company, which is nice too if you want to see like how other teams have used a React component you want to use on your
I've
team.
never heard of SourceGraph, so that's pretty. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Priest has an additional question. Have you ever participated in a hackathon? Did you win? Would you consider it your second paid job? Priest, are you speaking about the hackathon or? Okay, so let's just start with, have you ever participated in a hackathon and did you win?
I have wanted to participate in a hackathon. I think I haven't found one that I'm like really excited by. I've even like showed up to them and then leave because I don't know. I feel like with a hackathon, knowing that it'll be a weekend investment, I'm also really careful in like how I'm using my time. So I did show up once to a hackathon. Didn't really like feel the vibe or like the kinds of projects people were like planning to work on, so I left. I don't know. That's me. I just like, if I'm gonna code all weekend, I just want to make sure I'm using my time well. So there are a bunch of hackathons out there though that I've heard about. They don't come to mind at the moment. I can also send out a list to Whitney later about the ones I've heard good things about. But the idea I've always liked. Like I'm someone that likes to collaborate and pair program. So let's see. But I know Whitney participates in a lot and has even won money. So like I'm sure she has more experience than I do, but I have once mentored in a hackathon. I volunteered to like help current college students with their projects, and that was a good experience. But I haven't been like a participant yet.
Fun story, Scarlett and I showed up to a hackathon in San Francisco. We decided to leave and go spend the day at some park or something like that. That was a really
great alternative.
So like one really big thing that Scarlett said is have a purpose for going to that hackathon. There are trillion hackathons happening at any given time, and especially now it's virtual. So you can be in Grenada and do a hackathon in Russia or like all these different places, but you have to be intentional because one, you have to understand why you're doing this hackathon. Is it because you're going after the prize, which there is monetary prize, and the prize may be enough for you to dedicate. Like I actually know some people who entire career is just doing hackathons, winning prizes, and just traveling the world like that because they know they have mastered the hackathon game, so they do that. But for instance, for like the early developer, your purpose for going into hackathon is to one, build your portfolio, two, build your community and relationships across the hackathon space and other developers who are also probably first-time hackathon people or up to the point of like traveling the world doing hackathons only, right? So you get access to a wide space of developers who also like to make things happen. So that's like a really good benefit. And if you know that's the reason for going to a hackathon, don't just keep your head down in a hackathon. Like most times the hackathon community, you'll be on a Slack channel or something like that. Spend time actively DMing developers, even if they're not on your team, to like make a connection. Be like, hey, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? Can I jump on a call with you? These different things. You have to figure out ways to extract value from these things that exist, but you don't have to abide fully into it. Other parts of it is like when you do a hackathon, choose your team wisely because most times I realize first-time hackers, they end up on a team with their friends and all of them either don't know anything or they know the same thing. So like I always, when I used to do hackathons serially, because like coming down to my second to last year at Howard, I really hated being on campus. Like literally every other weekend, I would be traveling to a hackathon. So when I used to do that, when I went, I would literally have an intention of like, okay, I want to push myself. I want to challenge myself to one, meet new people, join a team that I have no idea or it may not even be my idea because most times I'll be leading the project. So maybe if I led the hackathon project last time, this week I will be like a teammate and let someone else lead it. And then I will challenge myself to take up a new technology that I've never touched because the hackathon creates such a really great space for you to just try new things without the risk. So for instance, I've picked up a lot of skills just by a 2-day weekend hackathon that today I probably never touched again, but I knew what I did and I can literally act like if I know everything about it because of that one weekend spent playing around with this one little technology. And another great thing about hackathons, they usually have free resources. So I used to go to get like free access to like cloud credits, get free domain names and all these different things. Cool. Is there any other question? Feel free to come up mute or I will ask from the doc.
Yeah. So I know for me, a big problem I would realize in a lot of my projects or stuff that I'm trying to work on is sometimes getting kind of tunnel vision. I'm kind of asking this question to know if that's something that any of you, whether it would be Whitney or Scarlett, would struggle with as well. And when you, in other words, I'm trying to figure out how to see that happening before it happens in a way so that I could catch myself before it happens and try to like um rethink or reapproach a problem sometimes, walk away from it and reapproach it in a different way.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm someone that could be doing a better job of taking more breaks when it comes to working on a project that I've been looking at intensely for a while. One example that comes to mind is like during my internship, it was like near the end, one, you have COVID happening and adjusting to work from home. And those are like situations where you definitely need to be giving yourself mental breaks. But I was like stuck on something. I didn't get why I was getting it wrong because logically it didn't make sense for me to keep getting this error. And my sister was like, just take a break, like look at it tomorrow. But I'm like, no, it has to be today. And then I realized that I just didn't refresh my browser. So like whatever I was coding, the changes weren't taking, all I had to do was refresh my browser and I didn't think of
Like
it.
that sometimes? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, one of those things. So sometimes you really do need to take a break. And like when people are telling you, it's because they see how long you've been staring at your screen and still struggling. And then another thing that helps with like tunnel vision in terms of, getting so deep into the code and then later realizing, oh, wait, this is not what the direction should be, is like taking the time to plan out your project, even if that means a week, 2 weeks of really thinking about like the APIs you're going to use. It even helps to take time to like mock out depending if you're doing like a entire full stack application, to like mock out your UIs, like, okay, what does my front end look like? To start playing with the APIs you might use. So for example, let's say you're using Lyft's or Uber's API, just making sure that one, you have, of course, like access to it, but two, that you already know like the data format that you're getting back to make sure that's what that you're getting the info you're getting. So project management and just really taking a break. Sometimes just getting up, walking around, having a chat with someone else, and then going back to it will help you see it in new eyes. And in the end, if you're still stuck on something, have tried all the resources, that's when I also go to someone for help. I'm like, you know what? I need a new eye on this because I don't see what I'm doing wrong. Can you help me? This is what I've tried. I need guidance. Yeah.
Yes, that was a great share, Scarlett. And I've heard some other opinions across the space where the biggest thing is to not check yourself in time for you to get help. And you can apply like different checks on yourself according to that. For instance, if you know, so this is back to the task management and like tracking yourself as you do this task. For instance, like having a counter also, and most times in project management, before you start the task, you're supposed to estimate how long you plan to spend on it. So as you're working on this task, you're like literally you have a timer also. I'm anal, so I have a timer. I'm not sure what others do. Maybe I don't know if you have a timer, Scarlett.
I do. I also use like the Pomodoro technique where you like
Yeah.
work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, and repeat that cycle.
Nice. Yeah. And so when you have a timer and you know your original estimation, by the time you're going over your estimation, you'll have to stop yourself and ask like, what's happening here, right? And then what you can do is one, get up, walk, take a break, and then when you come back, you're like, okay, I'm gonna give myself. You can set this is an arbitrary number. So I have senior engineers who set like 25 minutes for themselves to do this again. Not necessarily do it again, but try to solve this problem the same way again, right? So if after 25 minutes and they realize that, wow, okay, this is not working, I'm facing the same bug and so on, something is wrong fundamentally. So what they do is take the action that Scarlett mentioned, which is tap someone, or they try to like not necessarily scrap everything, but come off the laptop and go on a whiteboard and try and break down step by step what is the original problem they were trying to solve. And then from there, do it in English, and then come back to your code and see if that's what was happening. And also, when you come back, you'll be able to scan each line for line the same way that with a new fresh sense of understanding of what exactly you were trying to accomplish in the beginning. Travis, I'm not sure if you'll be open to sharing your own experience with tunnel vision.
Oh, well, happens all the time. For me, whenever I get into a point where I feel confused, kind of lost, it's like a mental alarm for me to get clarity. For at least for myself, I've realized that sometimes when I get into tunnel vision, like my mind can sometimes go in autopilot mode, and like I'll just start debugging. Like say if I'm on a problem stuck on some kind of error, I'll just start debugging and on autopilot. But when it's time for me to ask for help, talking to someone helps me like talk through my problem, and then it's like what they call it, rubber duck debugging or so. And that's so like I realize before I even ask somebody for help, I'll realize, okay, I just need clarity, and I'll stop and talk to myself and ask myself the question that I would ask someone else, and then just talk myself through the problem. Well, I'll take a break and then come back and talk myself through the problem, and that's how like I kind of get myself out of those situations.
Nice. I remember Travis was struggling a lot with tunnel vision in one of his meetings. So that's great work. Anyone else have a question?
I have to leave. I just decided to drop in really quick. But you guys, I just wanted to say hi.
This is one of the admins at the bootcamp. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually on Granan's Beach right now.
Okay.
Awesome. Enjoy.
Yes.
I have a lot of people. Yeah. I came with my boot. I want to say hi.
Very kind. And I'm sharing the
Say again?
and thanks for joining, and I will share the recording afterwards.
Yeah. I have to go and pick up my family and things. Bye-bye. It's really nice seeing you guys. Okay, bye-bye.
Awesome. Scarlett, we are at the 1 p.m. mark. Do you want to drop, or I'm leaving it in your court now?
I can answer a few more if there are questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving me your extra time. Anyone else has additional questions?
Oh, I just want to drop one more thing that really helped me from some Google engineers. I think this is what really helped me get clarity was when they taught me how to ask a question and how to ask for help, because I'm pretty bad at asking for help. But I realized whenever I'd bring my issues to other people, it's like they gave me a little framework where it's just like, what are you trying to do? What have you done to do that? And you know, what's happening when you do those things. And it's just like it's when I ask people questions, it's not just like, oh, I have this problem and it didn't work out. it's just like for me, it's just creating more clarity and understanding of exactly what's happening. And once I start going through like how to ask that question, once I start filling out those questions of like, all right, what exactly am I trying to do? What's the error that's happening? Why is it happening? What have I tried to do to get around those things? And then after a while of like just gets, like, okay, these things aren't working. I just write down those things and then I bring it to someone. I'm like, I'm stuck. And a lot of times going through that process, I just solve the problem before I even need to ask for help.
Yes, that's awesome. I love to get that framework from you, Travis, sometime. And another balance you have to strike is how quickly do you ask for help, in the sense that all of those techniques that both Scarlett, Travis, and myself shared, it's self-driven in the sense that you have to know, like, at what point did you give your best effort to solving this and resolving it and resolving it, and then ensuring that you don't waste a bunch of additional time by your third resolve and you still don't have that solution, and then go tap into a senior person or someone else, because these other persons, they're happy to help, but the fact that you immediately come and ask me without thinking this through shows them that you are not being thoughtful and you're not driving yourself in terms of growth and actually trying to solve the problem, because it's a learning journey as well. Any other questions? So from the document, will you say, do developers get coders block? Like something like book writers, like how when you're author, you get like a writer's block. Do you think you get a coding block? And if you do, how did you get around that?
That's a good one. Let me think. Coder's block. I think for sure, especially like when you're stuck on a problem, you feel like, and you've tried the whole reading the error, Googling the problem. There's like a point that I reach from like, I think I've exhausted all the possibilities. Like I've looked on GitHub for like code parallels. I've searched, another technique that I use at work is like searching Slack, like has someone else try to do something similar. And I know like it's like a lame answer, but it's always for me when once I like figure out like, oh, that aha moment, like, oh, I know what to do, I know how to fix it. It's like when I've taken a break, it's when I've slept some more. Coding is very mentally exhausting. It just taxes you in a way that like I haven't felt in other careers I've had, like as a teacher or, when I was an art history student. And I think this is like definitely the kind of career where like work-life balance becomes key, just because it takes so much of your time. And like Travis's framework of like when to reach out, like how to ask questions, that's definitely, yeah, that you definitely need to like switch things up, like either switching up the environment. Now that everyone's work from home, depending on like how flexible your company is, like figuring out your work hours, because like there's trying different mediums to kind of just switch up the kind of like coding space you're in. For me, I've figured out all my aha moments when I've taken a break, more often than asking directly someone for the solution. Like there are a lot of times where I feel like I can't solve it, and you just go into this loop of like, am I even a developer? Should I even be coding? Maybe I should have stayed as a teacher. And there's like the cycle. So Flatiron taught us this like swamp model where like you learn something or you're introduced to a project and you're like at the top, you're like very happy, you're like very excited, you're curious, this is a new adventure. And then you go deep into that project and you're at the bottom of the swamp, you feel like you can't do it. But then you spend some time there, and in that time you learn more about what you don't know, and now you know how to ask the right questions or Google the right questions, and then you go back to the top. So it's like this loop of feeling like you know how to do it, feeling like you don't. And it's like a cycle, and there's always room for improvement. So I'm still figuring out how to like unblock myself better when I'm in like a coder's block.
Thank you for that. So Okito had a question, like how will you rate your bootcamp program? Were you taught all that you know, or was it all a self-learning process?
I feel like when I graduated my bootcamp, at that time, everything I learned was from my bootcamp experience. I rarely supplemented, while I was in the program, rarely supplemented what I was learning with like another tutorial or another course I was doing at the same time. Of course, like I read articles if that would help with like figuring out a thing I was stuck on, but I used my course's curriculum 100%. And I was happy that once I got to Lyft and started coding, that a lot of the things I learned was applicable. Because I think I mentioned, like, I was always afraid boot camps would be a scam, that I wouldn't be learning the things I needed to be an employed dev. But as far as Flatiron, I can speak to being very happy with their curriculum, because it prepared me for what I did, like my first 6 months at Lyft. Now I'm doing infrastructure. Oh, hackathons at boot camps. Let's see. Oh, I haven't done a hackathon, so I'm not sure if you.
Oh, sorry, Scarlett. Sorry, this is Janine Stephen. It was me. I saw a comment and I'd made I'd answered something, but it's no. Don't worry. Carry on doing what you were doing.
No worries. So my first 6 months at Lyft was on a product team, and so it was a full stack experience. So definitely my Flatiron experience was applicable. But now I'm on an infrastructure team, so working lower in the stack and specifically working in like the Kubernetes realm of tech. So this is, some people call this like the DevOps realm, and that's completely not touched on at Flatiron. But I think boot camps teach you to be scrappy. You learn how you best learn. Through the process, you find mentors. So even though I'm in this whole new world, I still feel like the tips I learned about like what to do when I'm stuck, like how to ask questions, is directly applicable. And it's kind of like now I'm self-teaching myself how to be like this DevOps engineer, because that was something I didn't get covered in bootcamp.
Scarlett said it really well in the sense that your bootcamp can teach you languages and all these different things, but by the time you end your bootcamp, nothing is keeping that language still relevant, So the whole point is like you should never be attached to a technology, a language, or a framework, because it changes so rapidly in the field of innovation and technology. What you have to do is develop your best self-management process, your best project management process, as well as all of the tips that was shared in regards to how do you do your best work, what do you do when you're stuck, and these different things. So like what you're building is healthy habits that you can move through your career as a software engineer with, because the most important thing that you have to bring to the table is one, your brain, your problem solving, not your code, because your problem solving is what enables you to write any type of code and solve any type of problem. The code is like the pen that you use when you write. And that changes. And like once you master your specific learning technique, for instance, when you realize you learn best by watching videos, then therefore you double down in learning anything new by watching a video. And like at this point, I watch videos at 2x speed, like I don't need to watch it at 1x. So like you just optimize your process that works best for you. And that's how you just continuously scale through this space. But I think that's all of the questions left. Actually, one more. How did your previous profession as a teacher and like an art history major help you? And like, do you think that enabled you to have like an advantage compared to other traditional techies, especially those who are like more caught up in the complex problems and like they're really smart or algorithm based, but like in real world, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I think of two things. I think as a teacher, in my day-to-day, like I'm constantly taking notes. Like I use this application called Bear, BEAR, and I keep all my notes there. I organize them. I try not to commit things to memory. This is what I learned early on in like bootcamp. Like you don't need to memorize everything. You can Google. You can always go back and Google. But there are certain things, like for example, if someone taught me a trick in like a terminal shortcut or instructions on how to set up my dev environment, like those are things I keep detailed notes on because I know I'm not going to remember. And you want to ask questions, but you don't want to be asking the same questions, So like I definitely keep down certain notes. And I think being a teacher really helped me in just knowing that I should be doing this. And also in my previous company as a solutions engineer, I started taking notes on every ticket I did. And then I started sharing it with new hires. And then eventually it turned into like kind of like an onboarding guide, because I'd taken notes on every single ticket I'd done. And a few months in, I'd had notes on over 100 tickets that covered different aspects of the kind of problems you'd see at the company I was in. So it was nice to see like what I started just for myself to help me remember, this is the problem, this was the solution, this was how to get to the solution, be used by other new hires. I also blog, one, to reinforce what I'm learning, and two, to share it with others. So I think people have highlighted that like, oh, maybe it's because you were a teacher. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess maybe that's why. But yeah, I never like immediately like clicked with like that's might be like why I was blogging. And then in terms of like, I'll say in terms of, people say like the technical interview process is very different from like what you're learning in boot camp. And so like that's sometimes a barrier, because you need to teach yourself the kinds of things CS students are learning over 4 years for that interview process. But one thing I'd say that boot camp students stand out in is like having the practical experience of building a web app. So when I started at Lyft, Flatiron taught us how to make mock calls to API. And I remember asking one of the other interns, like, oh, like, can you show me how you've done your mock calls? I'm not used to the Lyft developer environment. And she mentioned like, oh, I just write tests, like unit tests. And that's something that my bootcamp didn't cover. So I was like, oh, okay, you can write tests, but I wanted to see it practically. And I think, I wanted to like see what the request looked like, what the response looked like. And I think boot camps do a good job of giving you those practical skills of how a web development works, because not every company is unit testing. You should, but not every company is doing it. So like seeing how things are actually working is what you're learning in your boot camp. And I think not every CS student in their 4 years makes a project in the extent that you do as a boot camp student. So you definitely stand out in that way.
Yes, like Travis and myself would definitely say that we learned nothing throughout our CS degree. We learned most of our skill sets by doing projects and at internships and so forth. So like I really see the advantage of a bootcamp is that complete and rapid application development. And I think that's all in terms of questions. Scarlett, do you want to still do your debugging, or we can do that some other day as well? No pressure. Oh, you're on mute. Still not hearing you. Are you having mute problems? Let's see. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do it another day so I can have like a full curriculum of like showing you a step of what I do.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's been a while since I've looked at some of my bootcamp projects.
That's awesome. But I'm pretty sure like everyone on this call can like reiterate the fact that this was really helpful. I even learned a couple of stuff from like your journey and like the way you approach things. Like my team is not a traditional product group, so like hearing your perspective, I always learn as well. I really appreciate the time you took to join.
No, thank you both. And learned a lot right now in this 1 hour from you and Travis. So thank you. I took notes. I'm like, yeah, because I start full time on Monday. So this is I'm going to be asking questions, scope out confusion. So thank you for also sharing your
Good luck. Good luck on Monday. Are you excited?
Nervous, but excited. Definitely excited. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I hope wish you luck, and I'll circle back around.
Sounds good. And
yeah.
hold me accountable to the debugging session, because I really want to do that.
Okay, definitely. I'll add that to my to-do.
Cool. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye.